No, I think that's Mark's, which I probably can't do as good at it as he did, so. Well, good morning, everybody. Good morning. So, we'll get started as soon as, my slides are loaded, so as soon as we get them, we'll go. But thanks everybody for being here. Maybe while they're working on it, we can just start our class with prayer. So let's do that. Father, we thank you for this time we have together this morning to look into your word and consider your direction for our lives. And we pray, Father, that in all things we would subside our will and put your teachings, your ideas for us, put those at the front of the line, and do our best to live our lives as good disciples of your Son and good brothers and sisters to each other and good witnesses to the world. Father, we just thank you for this time that we can learn together and share with each other. It's in Jesus' name we pray. Amen. Ah, there it is. Okay, so our topic today is stewardship, and I know how excited you all are about that. And yeah, well, great. So most of us have probably done this study already in some form or another. You know, and I think every verse we'll look at today, depending on how far we get, we've looked at it before. And these aren't difficult passages that we're going to look at, and they're not difficult to understand. But like a lot of what we see in Scripture, the difficulty comes in the execution. And I think what I like to do is the verses that we're going to look at today, the old familiar verses, I consider them to be mirror verses. So you just periodically need to hold yourself up to these verses and take a look at them and just ask yourself, how am I doing? Is this how I'm living my life? And we'll have a chance to do that today. So here's some ideas about stewardship, or some direction from the Bible. And let's just start off with a quick quote from Luke 12:42, and the Lord said, "Who then is the faithful and sensible steward whom his manager will put in charge of his servants to give them their rations at the proper time?" And this comes in a long section of Jesus' teaching on watchfulness. And here we just see the idea of a steward and someone who takes care of somebody else's resources. And the word translated steward in this case is also used in manager in a lot of places, or something similar. It's translated in different ways, but typically throughout the New Testament, when we see this word, it's translated manager. But we want to kind of narrow that subject down and just talk about being Christian stewards. So here's a verse that speaks more directly to being a Christian steward of what God has blessed us with. First quote from the NIV, and you can see the idea is faithfully administering God's grace in its various forms. Same verse in the ESV. As each of you has received the gift, use it to serve one another as good stewards of God's varied grace. So, and this is the same word that we looked at in Luke, which denotes just a manager of a household or an estate. So, but we can see that Christian stewardship, we don't see a lot of verses that speak directly to Christian stewardship, but it's a thing. It's here in, we see it here in this translation. And the verses that we're going to look at today, the principle is loud and clear. It's something that's expected of us as followers of Christ. And I kind of think of it like providence. I don't know if there's a verse that talks about, God's providence, but we can have a huge series of teachings on that. The principle is there in the New Testament. Aaron's not even here. But we always have to have a definition of what we're talking about. And so this is the definition we're going to use. Christian stewardship refers to the responsibility that Christians have in maintaining and using wisely the gifts that God has bestowed. God wishes human beings to be his collaborators in the work of creation, redemption, and sanctification. So the bolded part is kind of the definition. The part that comes after that is interesting to me. It's more of a commentary. But what do you think about that, the idea of being God's collaborator? It seems, to me, it seems like that's an awful big thing to put on my shoulders. God can do a lot better. He doesn't need my help. But anyway, I think in some sense, we are God's collaborators. And maybe not in the work of creation, but we'll talk about that a little more. We talked about it last week. But we help share these teachings. We bring these thoughts out to the world. So in some ways, we are collaborators. But anyway, so there's our definition. Do you know who said that?
Allan Steinle.
No. Her. I don't know where she got it, but when she found out I was doing this class, she sent me that definition. So anyway, maybe it's original. I don't know. It wouldn't surprise me. Okay. And I think before we go any further, I'd like to start with a few more quotes. So the world asks, what does a man own? Christ asked, how does he use it? And it's more of a principle than an actual quote of Jesus, but a guy named Andrew Murray said that I think is pretty applicable. It's a good point of view for our study today. Stewardship is not about raising money, it's about raising Christians who willingly trust God. And we'll talk about that probably more than once. Stewardship takes faith. Stewardship takes faith. Show me your checkbook and I'll show you where your heart is. And Larry Burkett, we've probably all heard him on the radio. He talks about Christian perspective of finances and money. It's an interesting thought. And so when I read that the first time, I thought, well, then our checkbook's going to say our heart is at Costco, because that's where our money goes. My grace is enough. It's all you need. For everything else, there is MasterCard. And that's not really in the Bible. I know it sounds like it might be, but it's not. Some guy named Eugene Peterson said that. But it's kind of the same idea as what Larry Burkett was talking about. Most Christians today believe that if you give a little bit of what you have, then you have been a good steward. Does that at all mesh with any of your concept of stewardship? I mean, collection plate comes around once a week, we put a little bit in, and we are stewards. Is that right? Okay. Well, if you've ever had I know you've all had a class on stewardship, so you know that's not right. So here's another quote from a guy named Shane Stafford, who's a Methodist minister. In teaching about stewardship, I realized that families and individuals must develop a healthy lifestyle in order to experience financial health. Good budgets and debt reduction are not enough. In order to change our financial future, we have to address what drives our financial behavior. And I guess, the sentence that grabbed me was good budgets and debt reduction are not enough. So isn't that being a pretty good steward? Reduce your debt, have a good budget, follow it, don't overspend. What's wrong with that? I don't know about this church, but one of the churches, when we were still in Rio Rancho, I found a whole kit that they had used before we got there for Dave Ramsey, Financial Peace University, and that's what that whole thing is about, good budgets and debt reduction. So how can that not be enough? It's a good start. Yeah.
I agree. It's a good start.
Yeah.
I just remember us being, young Christians and people helping us out. Well, when you get to the point where you're like, I can do this now. Financially, I can help this person. It takes money to help
Yeah.
people a lot of times. So if you have those two things, then
Yeah.
you're able to do that.
And that's one of the things that Dave Ramsey says, put yourself in a good financial position and you're going to be able to help more people.
Dave Ramsey says, live like no one else, so later you can live like no one else.
Yeah.
To Diane's point, if you're a slave to your lenders,
Mhm.
what good can you do if you're paying on
Yeah.
the boat and the car and the house and you're a slave to it, and you never get to a point where you have money to share.
Mhm. Yeah. Or you certainly feel like you don't. Yeah. Anxiety, stress, and everything that comes with it. Okay. So yeah, you can have a great. Go ahead. Leilani, did you have something to say? The thought process behind it? Is that what you said? Yeah. Very, very good. Very good. So yeah, you can have a great financial position and be a terrible steward. Those two things don't go together. But one can help the other, as we've been talking about. So we're talking about Christian stewardship. What are we stewards of? What are we, as Christians, what are we stewards of?
We often tie it to money.
Mm-hmm. Money.
I know last week was creation, but our relationships are big.
Good. Yeah.
And particularly where we're in a position of authority. You have employees or children or where you have the upper hand, for lack
Mm-hmm.
of a better word.
You have the power. Yeah.
We're called to wield that power compassionately.
Mm-hmm. Okay. Did everyone hear what Sean said? Any? Okay. So Sean said, we usually think of it in terms of money, and we do, but he said relationships also. The relationships that we have in our lives, we should be good stewards of those different relationships, particularly where we are in a position of authority, where we have a little power over that person. We're kind of in control of that relationship. So that would be a good place to exercise stewardship principles.
We're stewards of each other.
Stewards of each other. Annette?
Our life energy, where we're putting all of our money and
Yeah.
if we work full-time, we're 2,080 hours a week, that's $60,000 over 30 years. We're an island monitor. We work so that we can pay our bills and so forth, but I think it's still a consideration if we can consume people in new ways.
Yeah. So where we put our you said life energy, where you exert your effort. Okay, that's good. Anything else? Anybody else? Okay. Here's some of the things we've talked about. And so like Sean said, we always think about money first. And money's part of it, no doubt about it. Yeah. And antique clocks. Yeah. Or our time. And I'd rather give you my money than my time, frankly. I'm a little stingy with my time. I could be a better steward of that, maybe. Use it more in service of God's kingdom. But I always feel like I never have enough time, and I may not want to share it. Okay, our families. That's one of the important relationships in our life, where we have, as adults and parents, we have the power until they turn teenagers. But it's a very important relationship. God has given us these children to raise, and it's our job to put them in a good position to succeed on their own, succeed on their own in life and hopefully in their walk with Christ. And for those of you who don't know, the girl on the left is my other daughter, Leah. I don't know if you've all met her or not. And that's her son, Nathan. We talked about this last week. We're stewards of God's creation. So, as a mirror, kind of holding it up to a mirror, how are we doing with that? We doing a good job? I hope none of you think we are. But we're trying. We're trying. How about the church? God's church. Are we stewards of that in any way? Yes or no? Someone has to say something.
Are you talking about the building?
No. That's just to represent the church. I think we are. Churches fail for different reasons. Churches split. Yeah, we're stewards of the church. So,
Alan, I would say that probably one of the things that in our society, the idea of church being community is not something that we talk about it, but we don't really set that as a priority a lot of times.
yeah. So our perspective on how we regard the church or the congregation that we're part of, and I'm thinking not the church as a whole, but just our congregation. Our perspective might color how our stewardship toward the body. Jerry? Yeah, that's part of it. Absolutely. And we're pretty good about sharing our building with the community. There's a lot of things that go on here during the week. Other people are in here. So we are stewarding the resources God gave us in that way. Sean?
Certainly in our tradition in Christendom, communion and the Lord's Supper is central to that. And 1 Corinthians, it's for anyone who eats and drinks without reckoning following the Lord, eats and drinks judgment on himself. I think the Lord's made it real clear. We are supposed to. That's part of it.
Okay.
Taking care of one another.
Take care. Okay, good. So we all have gifts, abilities. Between the lot of us, we have a lot of gifts and abilities, and those are something we can choose to either use or not use in service of the kingdom, service of the Lord. Ourselves, our health, our bodies, our physical bodies. That's a gift from God. How well are we using it? How well are we taking care of ourselves? And two very important things that God has given us, baseball and cake. But and our marriages too. So how, I guess everyone's heard statistics about the divorce rate and all that business, but is that not a gift from God? In the beginning, male and female cleave to one another. It's part of the plan. So how well we take care of our marriages, I think, is part of how well we're doing as Christian stewards. I think that's my last one. So most of the verses we commonly look at in a stewardship study do deal with money and worldly wealth. And there is actually a good reason for that, and we're going to follow that pattern today. And of the 39 parables that Jesus shared, 16 of them had to do with money and possessions. That's according to something I read. I didn't check it out, but we're going to go with it today. In the Gospels, 10% of the verses, in the different Gospel accounts, 10% of the verses deal with money. Did anyone believe that? I don't believe it. So, I was just reading this, and it said the same person that said 16 out of the 39 gospel or parables deal with money and possessions. He also said 10% of the verses in the New Testament account deal with money. I think that's high. But that's what he said. So, but there are a lot of teachings about money in the gospel. Yeah. Annette?
I've heard it stated one way or another comment like that, that all of the comments in the Old Testament and the kings and the major and minor prophets about all of the idolatry and Baal worship and all of those things translate into those verses talking about the love of money in the New Testament.
Okay. Idolatry? Okay. Well, there's a lot of talk about that. That's for sure. He also said the Bible offers 310 verses on love, which seems low, almost 500 on faith, and 500 on prayer. When it comes to money and possessions, there are over 2,000. So ignore the numbers, just look at the proportionality. Why the emphasis on money and possessions? Pardon me?
Money is controlling.
Okay, in what way?
You can't function without money, so it becomes its own religion almost, because people look at it to make money, to
Yeah.
survive, and they forget about the bigger picture.
Yeah. Okay.
Our heart is tied to it because we have a sense of security
Yeah.
tied to it.
Yeah. Yeah, and that's part of the big picture of stewardship. What do we put our faith in? And we'll talk about that more a little later. But we are influenced by our culture. We are influenced just by our own sinful natures. So money is a focus, and I think God knew how we were, and that's why He put a lot of information about dealing with wealth and possessions in His Word. And Matt, I just want you to know it makes me nervous when you just sit there and don't say anything. Okay.
Be optimistic, Allan. He's taking everything. He's doing an incredible job.
Okay, I'll run with that. Yeah. So, who have you met in your life that you think is a really great example of a Christian steward? Anybody come to mind that you'd want to share?
I remember when Jerry Paul Fox moved here, and I don't know all the details of it, but it was sold the house and they were trying to, they bought a mobile home and they were trying to do one of those exchanges where they wouldn't be taxed, and it was a significant amount of money to me at that time and them at that time, and it didn't work out. And I was like, gosh, is that really bugging you? Because I knew it would bug me.
Yeah.
And he said, you know, it's just comes down to green pieces of paper with dead guy's faces. And
Yeah.
shrugged his shoulders, and that was it. And that struck me.
Yeah.
He has his priorities in such a way, because I knew that would bug me.
Yeah, probably would have bugged me too if I had been involved. Yeah. Anybody else? Good stewards that you've met?
I had a good friend in Nashville who unfortunately passed away as well. A very generous man. His quote was, no generous person ever regrets being generous.
Mm-hmm. Okay, good.
Yeah.
So when I started thinking about that, I thought of Rakim and Esther. The idea that stewardship is all of our blessings. And so here's two young adults. They're just starting. Think back to when you were just first married, just starting your life together. So how are Rakim and Esther doing in their pursuit of the American dream? And I know Esther's not an American, but. So how are they doing?
Not very good.
Not very good. Are they good stewards? Yeah. So it's about using, and we'll talk about this again, all your resources. And we talked about resources other than money. And yeah, they're being awesome stewards of the gifts that God has given them. And then, of course, if we talk about them, we got to talk about Cody and Michelle. Also being awesome stewards of the gifts that God is giving them. They walked away from a pretty comfortable life here, at least for a while. And, I'm not saying they're suffering down there, but it's different. And as far as creature comforts go, it's probably not different. But they decided for a season they were going to give up that stuff and take care of those kids down there. So I think that's being an awesome steward. Okay, so I don't know how much my time might be. Obviously, though, we don't have enough time to talk, take a comprehensive look at this topic. So we're just going to look at some verses and talk about them. And the Old Testament has a lot to say about stewardship in general. But today we're going to focus on some familiar texts from the New Testament. And we're going to start with something that's familiar territory to everybody. And that's Matthew 25, verses 14 through 30. And it's the parable of the stewards. And like I said, I know everybody knows it, but we're going to read it just to get oriented here. Again, and the antecedent verses to this section refer being ready for the master's return. That's what he's teaching about here. Again, it will be like a man going on a journey who called his servants and entrusted his property to them. To one he gave 5 talents, to another 2, to another 1 talent, each according to his ability. Then he went on his journey. The man who received the 5 talents went at once and put his money to work and gained 5 more. So also the one with 2 talents gained 2 more. But the man who had received 1 talent went off, dug a hole in the ground, and hid his master's money. After a long time, the master of those servants returned and settled accounts with them. The man who had received the 5 talents brought the other 5. Master, he said, you entrusted me with 5 talents. See, I have gained you 5 more. His master replied, well done, good and faithful servant. You have been faithful in a few things. I will put you in charge of many things. Come and share your master's happiness. The man with 2 talents also came. Master, he said, you entrusted me with 2 talents. See, I have gained 2 more. His master replied, well done, good and faithful servant. You have been faithful with a few things. I will put you in charge of many things. Come and share your master's happiness. Then the man who had received the 1 talent came. We know about him. Master, he said, I knew that you are a hard man, harvesting where you have not sown and gathering where you have not scattered seed. So I was afraid, and I went out and I hid your talent in the ground. See, here is what belongs to you. The master replied, you wicked, lazy servant. So you knew that I harvest where I have not sown and gather where I have not scattered seed. Well then, you should have put my money on deposit with the bankers, so that when I returned, I would have received it back with interest. Take the talent from him and give it to the one who has 10. For everyone who has will be given more, and he will have an abundance. Whoever does not have, even what he has will be taken from him. And throw that worthless servant outside into the darkness, where there will be weeping and gnashing of teeth. So kind of just to summarize what we just read, Jesus says the kingdom of heaven is like a man who goes on a journey and trusts his possessions into his servant's hands. Christ wants his disciples to understand through this story that he, the master, is about to go on a journey, and he's planning on entrusting them, and ultimately us, with kingdom resources. And when he returns, he will hold us accountable for how we handle what he put in our trust. And as we've been talking, that's everything he put in our trust, not just our money. Of course, talents are what? It's money. So the word talent here refers to money. And apparently, I don't know what it would be worth in today's dollars, but apparently it's a lot of money. 1 talent was a lot of money. And
Kind of an interesting aside, though, the use of the word talent to mean gift or skill in English and other languages originated from an interpretation of this parable sometime late in the 13th century. Again, something I read, I don't know if it's true, but it sounds good. No, I lost my place. Oh, yeah, just reminds us that we should have an expanded view of the idea of not just money, like in this parable, but when we think of the word talent, it makes us realize there's a lot more that we have stewardship of than just our money. Some of us have probably more talent than money, so just something to keep in mind. So as a mirror verse, if we use this as a mirror verse and we hold the teaching up here, how are we doing? The Master's entrusted us with some resources. How are we doing? Are we gaining anything for him with those resources that he has entrusted us with? And that's just a rhetorical question. We don't have to talk about it. But it's good to think about. It's good to think about. What do you think the Master, well, this is kind of rhetorical too, but what do you think the Master expects of his stewards? You know, just put yourself in place of this parable, the Master giving you a bunch of resources to, obviously he expects you to use them on his behalf. So from what I'd like to look at now is 6 principles of effective stewardship that we can pull out of this parable, and I'm sure there's more than 6, but these are the 6 that were in the article that I read, so we're going to talk about them. And you can see them listed on this slide here. And the first one we want to talk about is accountability. So, are we going to be held accountable for the things that were put into our trust? Yeah. Is there anybody who's not worried about it? It's kind of scary. Yeah. Yeah, they're a little uncomfortable. Kind of like looking in a mirror. So here's a question for you too. Is there a difference between stewardship and giving? When we pass the tray, is there a difference between those two things? Okay. Yeah, they're both. Yeah. Any other ideas? Did everyone hear Brian? He said, no, they're a management of your money or what God gave you.
It's just part of stewardship.
Okay, expand on that. Part of stewardship.
Yeah. Well, we talked about
Yeah, we've been talking about it. Yeah.
using your gifts, the things God has given you. So what your donation or your tithing, whatever you want to call it, is just a real small part of stewardship.
Okay. Yeah, I'll go along with that. Giving is, I think of, this is just me talking now, so I think of giving as a subset of stewardship. It's part of stewardship. And the idea, though, of stewardship is much more encompassing, and in some ways it's a greater, our giving is worship. We give to worship. We talk about all the other things, a lot of times that our giving results in, but ultimately it's worship. Stewardship is a broader responsibility than that. It's using everything that God has blessed us with in his service in the kingdom. Jerry?
Give your body as a living sacrifice.
Yeah. That's stewardship, yeah. Okay. All right. Anybody else have any thoughts on that? Christine?
I think if you are giving thoughtlessly, carelessly, that is not stewardship.
Okay.
Your
Yeah.
giving should be with purpose.
Okay, so our giving should have purpose behind it, and we talk about that a lot. You can, the exact same act, if you do it with the right attitude, it's right. If your attitude is wrong, if you are a grudging giver, then there's really, that doesn't make God happy. Okay? Annette?
And I don't know if this is what you mean by risk, but, you
Hey, we're not there yet.
can.
But I'll let you jump ahead.
Well, I was just thinking about, you can, like you said, giving of our money is overall. So whichever part of stewardship, whether it's money or your time, life energy, if you're just giving, out of the extra that you have, that you don't really need, and it doesn't really hurt, that's really easy. But I think at some point, God calls us and puts it in front of us that at times, we have to give in faith where it hurts and where there's risk. And like I think of the widow's mite, that's one of the greatest examples in the Bible, because when you're retired, you're on a fixed income. That widow didn't have probably the opportunity to keep making lots of money and okay, I'll do all this and I can make more tomorrow. She gave everything she had without knowing what she could get tomorrow. And I think that aspect, that sacrificial part, is where we're challenged and stretched, and where God shows up and answers our prayers and fills in and enables. He's not going to let us down.
Okay. Yeah, thank you for sharing that. Anybody else? Okay. So one of the things I think we see in this parable, it's not how well we invest a portion of what God has given us, like, when the offering plate comes around, but how we invest everything for the Master, how well we use what he's given us to advance his kingdom. And actually, I was thinking about, well, who's a good example of that? Who do we know that uses everything they have to advance, God's kingdom? And you know who I thought of? Scott and Annette and Lance and Dory. Because they, ever since they've been here, as soon as they got their houses, they weren't just inviting people over for, friendly evening or something. They really used their homes as a resource. All kinds of events take place at their home. They're reaching out to people, trying to encourage them to grow the church, to advance kingdom causes. And I think that's just as much stewardship as anything. If you're using your vehicle to take people around town that can't get around, that's just as much stewardship as anything. So, we have a lot of stuff. We have a lot of resources. We all do. And I think some of them are partitioned off. Those are for us. This is for sharing. But I don't think that's the idea behind good stewardship. So stewardship, 24/7, 365 responsibility. Yeah, it is. What about me time? I'm sure you've never thought about that, but what about me time? What's that? Yeah. Yeah. Mm-hmm. Okay. Yeah. So if you binge Netflix over the weekend, that's me time. Are you being a good steward? I'm not trying to make anybody feel guilty. I'm not saying I never did it. I haven't.
I think it's whatever you need to do to recharge.
Yeah.
Like you said, as long as, obviously
Yeah.
there's some people who do their best, but, if that's what you need to recharge for, everybody needs that.
Yeah.
Everybody needs, some people go hiking, whatever it is that you need to do it.
Yeah. Yeah, I think, the idea of recharge, I think, is very valid, and everybody needs it. Everybody does it different ways. So, but I think it's proportionality comes into play here
It's
somewhere too.
always about balance,
Yeah.
everything. How much money you put aside for retirement? How much do I need for this? How much time do I put? Life is constantly about balance, and it changes day to day, depending on what's going on.
Yeah.
It's just something, for me anyways, it's just something I always struggle with. Too much, too little, and just always working on
Yeah.
where that balance is.
Yeah, that's something we get to decide for ourselves as God, stewards of what God has given us. Andy, were you going to say something?
Yeah, I would just say that one of the things that's come to my mind since we've been retired is that at different points in our married life, stewardship looked a little different. And as you age and as God has given you more opportunities and time and other things, then there's more time to do some of those things. As a young family, you're just struggling to get the kids in bed and up
Mhm.
and all that sort of thing. And so those of us who are a little older can walk alongside the younger families at times to help steward them in terms of helping them with whatever it is that they need. So there's these phases in life that we just, it doesn't mean that we don't steward what is. It's just that it may look a little different when I'm in my 20s than
Sure.
when I'm in my 60s.
Absolutely.
And so those kinds of nuances really help us in terms of working together as a community of believers.
Okay. Yeah. No, I couldn't agree with you more. I know that's how it was for Diane and I when we were in our 20s, just married. It was, literally paycheck to paycheck. We had to quit spending, for a few days because we didn't have any money left.
I was listening to Andy Stanley's podcast. I would listen to way too many podcasts. I understand that. But one of the things he was talking with his congregation about this very, very topic. And he said, I'm going to give you a really easy way to think about this. When you get your paycheck, the first 10% goes to your tithe. The second 10% goes into your savings, and you live off the 80%. And as you age, the tithe goes up, the savings go up, and what you live off goes down. He said, if you will just do those things, but his whole point was money, if you don't have priorities like Christine was talking about, and putting your tithe first, then all of a sudden you don't have anything at the end to give. And the same thing is true with your time.
Yeah. Okay. Okay, good point. Katie?
I was just thinking about, we were talking about the value of time and spend, we just talked about this in the New Testament, and I think that everything that's said about stewardship, especially where Jesus is supposed to be radical, and maybe in the sense that it's not about constantly, considering what, it is about constantly considering what you have, and what you do with what you have. But maybe more than that is understanding that actually you don't have anything.
Yeah.
When you commit yourself to Christ, it is not yours. None of it's yours. None of it belongs to you. And so, if that is where your thinking comes from, then it's going to radically change the way that you spend any money or time or anything like that.
Yeah.
Is in your possessions, but understanding that it's not actually in your possession.
Yeah.
It's God's.
Stewardship is actually, it's something I realized when I started this, it's something we talk about a lot. Or we've talked about it a lot. We don't talk about it all that often because it's something we know. But it's really challenging. If you really think about what all it encompasses, it's really a challenging concept. So, second point, urgency. Stewardship has a sense of urgency to it. Do we get that out of the parable? Scott, were you signaling me?
Yeah.
Am I done?
About time,
Well,
I was trying not to say you're done. Sorry.
like, how done am I?
What's that?
3 minutes.
Like, oh,
We hear that
3 minutes, okay. Well, let's use these 3 minutes that God has given us for a good purpose. So,
Stewards of that 3 minutes.
yes, okay. So the man who received 5 talents, what did he do? It says at once he got the work and put those talents to work for his master, and that's part of why he was able to gain 5 more. He did it right away. You know, it's kind of there's kind of a tendency, or maybe it's tempting to think, I got my whole life. Like Andy was telling us, by the time I retired and I'm not raising kids anymore, I'm going to have all this money, I'm going to have all this time, then then I'm going to do all this service. But is that, obviously that's, not the sense of urgency we should have. We all have, when we're young, we have our children. And if we're neglecting our stewardship responsibilities with our children at that stage in our life, that's going to have some dire consequences. So there should always be, I think, a sense of urgency among us. So, anyway, I guess I'm done. So thanks, everybody.